She thought I was the broke, forgotten ex-wife who never moved on. She thought wrong. The night Vanessa Caldwell laughed at me under a chandelier brighter than truth itself, she had no idea she was lighting the first spark of her own downfall. New York City humiliates people quietly. It doesn't scream. It smiles and lets others laugh for it. The charity gala at the Sterling Crown Hotel was proof. I almost didn't go. The invitation had arrived with gold embossing and an old name I hadn't heard in years. Mrs. Lillian Brooks was my married name, my ex-husband's name, Marcus Brooks, and now Marcus belonged to her. Vanessa Caldwell Brooks, 28, social media darling, champagne photos, designer dresses, viral couple reels with captions about true love after storms. Storm. That was funny, because I was the storm he left behind. The ballroom glittered like money pretending to be kindness. Investors, old money families, startup founders, influencers pretending to be philanthropists. The same crowd Marcus used to drag me into when I was the supportive wife. Back then, I handled everything. Schedules, contracts, investor emails at 3 a.m., crisis calls when shipments failed, payroll fixes when accounts froze. Marcus had vision. I had discipline. Together we built Brooks Freight Logistics from a 2-room office in Queens into a national tech shipping empire. But success has a strange disease. It convinces people they built everything alone, and Marcus caught that disease early. I saw them before they saw me. Marcus in a tailored tuxedo, salt and pepper hair now, smiling like a magazine cover. Vanessa on his arm in a red gown screaming for attention. She laughed loudly, the kind of laugh meant to be heard across rooms. Then her eyes met mine. For a moment she paused. Then she smiled, a slow, sharp smile, predatory. She whispered something in Marcus's ear. He turned stiffly. Our eyes met. 5 years since the divorce. 4 years since he remarried. 3 years since his company tripled in value. 2 years since magazines called them America's favorite power couple. And tonight? The first night they'd see me again. Marcus walked toward me. Lillian, he said carefully. Marcus? I replied. Vanessa followed, hand extended dramatically. Oh, wow, she said brightly. So you're the famous ex-wife. Famous? I raised an eyebrow. Nice to meet you, I said. She squeezed my hand. You look simple, she added sweetly, scanning my dress. I mean elegant, minimalist. That's trendy now, right? People nearby chuckled politely. Marcus shifted. Vanessa. She ignored him. Marcus told me you helped in the early days, she said loudly. That must have been adorable. Like a cute little couple startup phase. Cute. 22-hour work days were cute. Selling my jewelry to pay salaries was cute. Writing investor proposals while sick with pneumonia was cute. I smiled calmly. It was hard work, I said. Vanessa tilted her head. I just can't imagine building something and then walking away, she said. I'd fight for what's mine. Walking away. The lie tasted bitter. I didn't walk away. Marcus rewrote the shares, diluted my ownership, filed divorce 2 weeks later. Vanessa laughed softly. But everything worked out, she added. Some people move forward, others just stay in the past. There it was, public humiliation, carefully polished, deliberately cruel. And in that exact moment I realized something important. They still thought I was the same quiet woman they pushed aside. They had no idea about the offshore accounts, the silent partnerships, the patents filed under a different name, the investment firm I built quietly in Chicago, the shares I'd been buying in Marcus's biggest competitor. Vanessa smiled again, mocking, confident. careless. And I smiled back, because revenge doesn't scream, it waits. Vanessa didn't stop smiling. She leaned closer to me, as if we were old friends sharing a private joke, but her perfume was sharp, and her words were sharper. You know, she said lightly, brushing invisible lint from Marcus's sleeve, it must be strange coming back to a world that moved on without you. The sentence floated out gently, but it landed like a slap. Around us, the music swelled, violins and low bass, masking the tension, but not erasing it. Marcus stood between us like a man who knew a bomb had been armed but didn't know which wire to cut. If you love watching pride collapse in slow motion, don't forget to subscribe to her Retaliation, because here, every insult plants the seed of a comeback. I didn't react. That was the first thing Vanessa didn't expect. She expected anger, embarrassment, tears. Instead, I gave her composure. I don't come back to worlds, I replied calmly. I build new ones. For a flicker of a second, just one, her expression shifted. Marcus noticed it too. He cleared his throat. Lillian has always been resilient, he said, as if describing me from a distance. Resilient. That word men use when they mean she survived what I did to her. Vanessa laughed again, but it was thinner now. That's sweet, she said. Marcus tells me you preferred staying behind the scenes. I can't relate. I love being visible. I think when you have something valuable, you show it. Valuable. She wasn't talking about herself. She was talking about him, as if he were a trophy, as if she had won. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that visibility is a weakness when your foundation is fragile. Marcus's company, Brooks Freight Logistics, looked powerful from the outside. Expanding routes, international contracts, magazine covers. But expansion requires capital. Capital requires debt, and debt requires trust. Trust is expensive, and lately investors had been nervous. I knew because one of those investors now had dinner with me twice a month in Chicago. But I kept that to myself. Instead, I glanced around the ballroom slowly, as if studying the architecture. It's a beautiful event, I said. Who organized the funding partnerships this year? Vanessa blinked, thrown off by the shift. Marcus answered cautiously. We collaborated with 3 private equity groups. Only 3? I asked mildly. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Vanessa jumped in quickly. Quality over quantity, she said with a bright smile. We're very selective now. Selective. Interesting word for a company that had quietly lost 2 backers last quarter. I watched Marcus carefully. He knew I knew something. He just didn't know how much. Vanessa touched his arm possessively. Anyway, she said, her voice returning to syrupy sweetness, we should let you mingle. I'm sure this is overwhelming. Overwhelming. I almost laughed. Instead, I met her eyes steadily. Not at all, I said. I've always been comfortable in rooms where people underestimate me. Marcus inhaled sharply. Vanessa didn't understand the warning hidden in that sentence, but he did, because 5 years ago, when his first major competitor tried to crush his startup, it was me who stayed awake for 48 hours drafting the counter-strategy that saved his contracts. It was me who negotiated the emergency supply chain pivot. It was me who convinced investors not to pull out. And it was me who noticed the loophole in the shareholder agreement, the same loophole I had quietly used after the divorce, when I began acquiring small, forgettable shares through third-party firms. Not enough to alert him, just enough to matter later. Vanessa gave one last dazzling smile. Well, she said, I truly hope you found happiness. Everyone deserves a second chance in life. There it was again, that assumption that I was the woman who lost. I nodded politely. Oh, I did, I said softly, more than you can imagine. And then I walked away. Not quickly, not dramatically, just confidently. Across the ballroom, I felt eyes following me. Some recognized me, some didn't. But one man near the bar lifted his glass lightly in my direction. Ethan Cole, venture capitalist, sharp mind, quiet player, and currently the largest silent investor in North River Transit, Brooks Freight's fastest growing competitor. He didn't approach me. He didn't need to. Our alliance had been built months ago, carefully, strategically, patiently. Because revenge isn't loud, it's methodical. Behind me, I could almost feel Vanessa whispering again, probably asking Marcus why he looked pale. Because Marcus had just realized something. I wasn't here for nostalgia, I wasn't here for closure, and I definitely wasn't here for humiliation. I was here to observe, to confirm, to calculate. And tonight I had confirmed exactly what I needed. Their expansion was stretched thin, their investor circle was smaller, their public image was strong but vulnerable. And Vanessa had just made this personal. She wanted an audience. She wanted a show. She wanted to mock the ex-wife in front of Manhattan's elite. Fine, I would give her a show. Just not the one she expected. Because when the fall comes, it won't be a stumble. It won't be a collapse. And this time, I won't be standing behind Marcus. I'll be standing above him. Vanessa thought the night had ended with her victory, with her laughter echoing in that crystal ballroom like applause. But what she didn't understand was that some smiles are signatures, not reactions, and mine had just signed the first page of a very long plan, because humiliation is only powerful when the other person accepts it. And I had stopped accepting anything Marcus Brooks did to me the day I learned how quietly betrayal works, how softly a husband can rewrite contracts, how politely a lawyer can explain dilution clauses while pouring coffee, how calmly a judge can sign papers that erase years of sacrifice, and how loudly a new wife can laugh when she thinks the story is finished. If you love deep, emotional revenge dramas where every detail matters, subscribe to her Retaliation, because here, patience always wins. Across the ballroom, Ethan Cole kept his distance, but his presence was enough. He was not a loud man, not flashy, not famous on social media like Vanessa, but he was the kind of investor who could tilt markets with one quiet phone call. And when our eyes met, there was no greeting, no smile, just an understanding that the information we both needed had finally been confirmed tonight, because Marcus's shoulders were tense, his laugh forced, his glass never empty, and his phone screen lighting up too often for a man pretending to be relaxed. And I knew that pattern. I knew the way he checked numbers when shipments were delayed, the way his jaw tightened when payroll dates came too close to receivable cycles, the way his fingers tapped when investors hesitated, and tonight his fingers tapped constantly. Vanessa noticed it too, but she didn't understand it because she had married the magazine version of Marcus, the power couple version, the filtered photo version, not the sleepless, desperate debt-ridden founder who once begged me to stay awake with him until sunrise calculating fuel costs and route losses, not the man who whispered, "We'll lose everything," into my shoulder. When contracts almost collapsed, Vanessa pulled him toward another group of guests, laughing louder than necessary, introducing him to influencers and bloggers, spinning stories about their romantic journey. But Marcus kept glancing toward me, not angrily, not lovingly, but nervously, as if my calm presence reminded him of a math problem he couldn't solve anymore. And that was the moment Vanessa felt something shift, because insecurity has a smell, and she smelled it. She excused herself from a conversation and caught up to me near the terrace doors, her heels clicking sharply, her smile thinner now, her voice softer but colder. "You seem very confident for someone who left with nothing," she said, dropping the performance tone. "Did you finally get a job, or are you living off sympathy?" I turned slowly, letting the city lights behind me frame the silence before my answer, because pauses are powerful. They make people hear their own cruelty echo back to them. I never left with nothing, I said quietly. I left with experience. She rolled her eyes. Experience doesn't pay Manhattan rent. I almost told her about Chicago, about the firm I built with two women who had also been underestimated, about the logistics patents registered under my maiden name, about the small percentages I bought through quiet funds, about the consultant contracts North River Transit signed with me months ago, about the board member who still owed me a favor from a crisis I solved years ago. But revenge loses flavor when announced too early, so I only smiled. It pays more than you think. Vanessa leaned closer. Let me give you advice, she whispered. Stop showing up to places you don't belong. It's embarrassing. Belong. The word floated like perfume again, but this time it didn't sting. It amused me, because belonging is temporary, power is transferable, and arrogance is expensive, and she was spending it freely tonight. You're right, I said gently. People shouldn't stay where they aren't respected. She looked satisfied, thinking I had surrendered, thinking I was leaving, thinking she had won again. And that was the exact moment Marcus approached us, face pale, smile forced, asking Vanessa to join him for a photo with donors, and she went triumphant, heels clicking like applause, leaving him alone with me for the first time that night. He stared at me as if trying to read years of silence in 1 second. What are you doing here, Lillian? He asked quietly. Observing, I replied. His voice dropped. You're meeting Ethan Cole again, aren't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His eyes widened slightly, and in that tiny reaction I saw the fear he was hiding from everyone else, the fear of numbers he couldn't fix anymore, of loans that were due, of competitors gaining routes, of investors asking questions, of Vanessa spending money on an image that needed constant feeding. And suddenly he understood that my presence tonight wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't curiosity, it was timing, and timing in business is everything. You should let the past go, he said weakly. I did, I replied. That's why I built something new. He swallowed, and before he could speak again, cameras flashed. Vanessa called his name. The orchestra rose louder, and the ballroom swallowed him back into glitter and illusion. But I stayed on the terrace, watching Manhattan lights stretch like a map of possibilities, feeling the cold air steady my thoughts, because tonight had shown me everything I needed. Marcus was vulnerable, Vanessa was careless, their empire was stretched, their pride was loud, and their fall was closer than they knew. And somewhere inside the hotel, Vanessa laughed again, confident, mocking, fearless, still believing I was the past. She didn't realize yet I was the future they were about to face. Vanessa believed wars were fought in public, in ballrooms, on Instagram, in whispered insults that sounded like compliments, but real wars are silent, slow, and patient. And by the time the loser realizes one has started, the ending is already written. That night after the gala, when Manhattan's lights faded behind my taxi window and Marcus Brooks was still posing for photos with his glittering wife, I opened my laptop in the quiet hotel room and began the first real move. Not emotional, not dramatic, not loud, but precise. Because revenge isn't about anger. It's about architecture. It's about building consequences so carefully that when they arrive, they feel inevitable. If you love long, emotional, strategic revenge stories that unfold step by step, subscribe now to her Retaliation, because every insult deserves a perfect answer. I started with numbers, because numbers don't lie even when people do, and Brooks Freight Logistics had been bleeding quietly for months. Expansion into the Midwest without stable fuel contracts, rush warehouse leases at inflated prices, new routes announced before software integration was complete, influencer marketing budgets Vanessa insisted on that brought applause but no real clients, and worst of all, A refinancing agreement Marcus had signed with a predatory private equity group that looked harmless in press releases but brutal in clauses, because if revenue targets slipped even slightly, the interest rate would spike like a knife twist, and I knew Marcus's habits. I knew how he chased growth to hide losses, how he believed the next contract would fix everything, how he ignored warnings until the storm was already inside the house. So I wrote 3 emails. The first went to a shipping analytics firm in Seattle, requesting updated market projections under the consulting alias I'd used for 2 years. An alias Marcus never connected to me because pride makes people blind. The second went to a lawyer in Boston who specialized in hostile but legal acquisition strategies. A woman named Clara Benson, who once told me over coffee that patience is the most expensive weapon in finance. The third went to Ethan Cole, short and simple. They're weaker than expected. We move phase 2, he replied in less than a minute. Already prepared. That word carried months of quiet meetings, spreadsheets, legal structures, silent investors who trusted me more than Marcus because I had never chased headlines, never broken contracts, never gambled with payroll, because reputation isn't built with magazine covers, it's built with consistency. And Marcus had forgotten that the day he decided admiration mattered more than stability. Vanessa didn't know any of this. She was probably posting filtered photos from the gala with captions about elegance and success, comments flooding in with hearts and praise, while Marcus lay awake next to her staring at the ceiling calculating numbers he didn't want to admit were real. The next morning, I flew to Chicago, where my office overlooked the Gray River, and the trains rattled like reminders that real logistics wasn't glamorous. It was timing and fuel and contracts and trust. My partners Nadia Clark and Sophia Mendez were already waiting with coffee and updated projections because they trusted my instincts. And when I told them Brooks Freight had crossed the line from risky to unstable, they didn't argue. They just asked one question: how fast do we move? I looked at the skyline and remembered Vanessa's laughter echoing under chandeliers, remembered Marcus's pale face, remembered the years I spent building something that was taken from me politely, legally, quietly, and I answered, slow enough that they don't see us, fast enough that they can't stop us. Phase 2 wasn't sabotage, it wasn't illegal, it wasn't revenge in the childish sense, it was opportunity. Because North River Transit would quietly secure fuel contracts Brooks Freight had been negotiating, investors would be offered better returns with safer structures, warehouse landlords would receive more stable long-term tenants, and one by one, doors Marcus expected to open would close politely in his face, not because I slammed them, but because they offered better terms, better reliability, better trust. That is how empires fall. Not with explosions, but with alternatives. Meanwhile, Vanessa kept smiling online, posting brunch photos, couple selfies, captions about loyalty and success, unaware that loyalty can't save a business drowning in debt, unaware that the woman she mocked had spent years learning every weakness of the company she married into, unaware that the quiet emails sent that morning would echo louder than any insult she ever spoke. Late that evening, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We need to talk, please. I knew the number. Marcus. For a long moment, I stared at the screen, remembering promises, betrayals, the nights we worked side by side, believing we were building a future together. And then I put the phone face down on the desk, because the first rule of strategy is timing, and Marcus wasn't ready to hear my voice yet. Not until the cracks in his empire were too wide to ignore, not until Vanessa's laughter started sounding like worry, not until the world he showed off under chandeliers began trembling under its own weight, because the first move had already happened, invisible, irreversible. And somewhere in Manhattan, Vanessa Caldwell Brooks was still laughing, still confident, still certain she had humiliated the woman she thought was powerless. She didn't realize yet. The board had already been set. Vanessa didn't notice the first crack. Cracks never announce themselves. They appear quietly, in tone changes, in delayed replies, in forced smiles at breakfast tables too large for honesty. 3 weeks after the gala, the mansion in Westchester still looked perfect from the outside. White stone walls, glass balconies, a driveway long enough to hide problems before guests reached the door. But inside, silence had started replacing laughter. If you enjoy watching pride slowly unravel in power shift without warning, subscribe now to her Retaliation. Because the best revenge is the one they never see coming. Marcus Brooks hadn't slept properly in days. He stood in his home office staring at spreadsheets that refused to cooperate. Fuel contracts he had verbally secured were suddenly under review. A warehouse expansion in Ohio had been delayed after the landlord chose a more stable logistics partner. 2 mid-tier investors postponed their quarterly meeting. Postponed. Marcus hated that word. Across the hall, Vanessa was filming a morning routine in the CEO household video. Sunlight pouring in perfectly, soft music playing, her voice light and carefree as she talked about productivity and success. Marcus works so hard, she told the camera, laughing gently. I just try to keep our home peaceful for him. Peaceful? Marcus almost laughed at that. His phone buzzed again. Another email from North River Transit announcing a new multi-state fuel agreement. North River. The name had started appearing too often, and every time it did, one image followed in his mind. Lillian on that terrace. Calm, unbothered, observing. He closed the laptop harder than necessary. Vanessa walked in seconds later, camera still in hand. Babe, could you smile for a quick clip? Just say something motivational. He looked at her as if she'd spoken another language. Not now, Vanessa. Her smile faltered just lightly. You've been saying that a lot lately. I'm busy. With what? She asked lightly, but there was edge beneath it now. Everything is doing great, right? The magazine feature said profits doubled. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Because magazine features don't show debt ratios. They don't show refinancing clauses. They don't show cash flow gaps. They're fine, he said finally. Vanessa crossed her arms. You're acting weird, ever since that gala. There it was, the night of laughter. Marcus stiffened. It has nothing to do with that. Then why did you text her? Vanessa asked suddenly. The air changed. Marcus's eyes snapped to hers. You went through my phone? You left it on the counter, she replied defensively. I saw the message. We need to talk. Please, he had sent it impulsively. Late, frustrated, unsure what he even wanted to say. I just wanted closure, he muttered. Vanessa let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Closure? After 5 years? Or are you worried? About what? About her. He looked away. And that silence was louder than any answer. Across the country in Chicago, I sat in a quiet conference room with Nadia Clark and Sophia Mendez, reviewing new projections. North River Transit had successfully secured 2 contracts Brooks Freight had been negotiating for months. Not aggressively, not suspiciously, simply, efficiently. His liquidity window is narrowing, Sophia said calmly, pointing to a chart. If the next quarter dips even slightly, refinancing triggers higher interest. Nadia looked at me. Do we accelerate? I thought about Vanessa's face on the terrace, about her calling me embarrassing, about her believing I had nothing. No, I said softly. We let pressure do its job. Pressure is honest. It reveals character. 2 days later, Vanessa hosted a luxury brunch for influencers at the mansion. White orchids, crystal glasses, designer catering. She laughed louder than usual, but halfway through the event, one of her friends, a fashion blogger named Chloe, leaned in and whispered, Hey, is everything okay with Marcus's company? I heard North River just landed that huge Midwest contract. Vanessa froze for a microsecond before smiling. Competition is healthy. But the word echoed unpleasantly in her mind. Competition. She excused herself and walked into Marcus's office without knocking. "Why is everyone talking about North River?" she demanded. Marcus rubbed his temples. "Because they're expanding. Are we losing?" "No." "Then why does it feel like we are?" He didn't respond quickly enough, and for the first time since marrying him, Vanessa felt something she had never felt before: uncertainty. That night, after guests left and silence returned to the mansion, Vanessa scrolled through social media and saw a headline: North River Transit emerges as most stable logistics investment of the year. Stable. The word hit harder than flashy, because investors don't chase excitement, they chase stability. She suddenly remembered something. The way I had said, "I build new worlds." Her stomach tightened. Marcus stood alone in his office later, staring at a new email notification. A major investor requesting an urgent review meeting. Subject line: reassessment of risk exposure. His hands trembled slightly, and for the first time in years, he thought about Lillian Hayes not as his past, but as a threat. Meanwhile, in Chicago, I closed my laptop and looked out at the river reflecting city lights. I wasn't smiling widely. I wasn't celebrating. This wasn't about destruction. It was about balance, about correction, about showing them that mocking someone's quiet strength is the most expensive mistake you can make. And as my phone lit up again with a news alert about North River's rising stock value, I whispered softly to the empty room, "This is only the beginning." The first real crack didn't happen in public. It happened behind a closed glass door on the 42nd floor of Brooks Freight Logistics headquarters, where Marcus Brooks sat across from three investors who no longer looked impressed. They looked cautious. Caution is more dangerous than anger. If you love watching the powerful slowly realize they are no longer in control, subscribe now to her Retaliation. Because here, every throne is temporary. The meeting had started politely. It didn't stay that way. "We're concerned about liquidity pressure," said Howard Grant, one of Marcus's earliest backers. "Your expansion rate isn't matching your retained earnings." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Growth requires risk." "Calculated risk," another investor corrected. "North River's projections show stronger margins with slower expansion." There it was again. North River. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. "They're playing safe," he replied tightly. "And you're over-leveraged," Howard said calmly. "If Q4 underperforms, the refinancing clause activates. You know what that means. Higher interest, lower flexibility, stricter oversight. And potentially board interference." Marcus nodded stiffly. "We'll stabilize." "How?" the investor asked simply. Marcus opened his mouth, and for the first time in years, he didn't have a clean answer. That evening, Vanessa was waiting in the mansion's living room, scrolling through her tablet. She had done something she had never bothered to do before: research. Not on fashion trends, not on event planners, on me. Lillian Hayes, the woman she mocked, the woman she assumed had disappeared. At first, she found almost nothing. No flashy interviews, no public profiles, no dramatic social presence. But then she dug deeper. Consulting contracts under a maiden name, advisory roles in Midwest logistics firms, a quiet but growing association with North River Transit. Her heart skipped. It couldn't be coincidence. When Marcus walked in, she didn't greet him with a smile this time. She held up the tablet. "Why didn't you tell me she's working with North River?" Marcus froze. "Because I wasn't sure," he said slowly. Vanessa stood up. "Not sure? She shows up at the gala. She's calm. North River starts taking contracts. Investors start panicking. And you're not sure?" He ran a hand through his hair. "You're overreacting." "No," she snapped. "You underestimated her." The room fell silent. Because that word hit truth. Marcus had underestimated me once before. It cost me everything. Now, it was costing him. In Chicago, I sat across from Ethan Cole in a quiet private dining room. No cameras, no noise, just strategy. Investor pressure has started, he said calmly, sliding a folder toward me. 2 more are considering partial withdrawal. I skimmed the pages without emotion. And Marcus? I asked, trying to secure emergency contracts. Too late for optimal leverage. I nodded slowly. This wasn't personal for Ethan, it was business. For me, it was both. Do we initiate acquisition talks? He asked. Not hostile, not aggressive, just prepared. I leaned back, remembering Vanessa's voice on the terrace. Stop showing up to places you don't belong. Belonging. Such a fragile concept. Not yet, I said quietly. Let them feel the instability first. Because fear makes people careless, and careless leaders make fatal decisions. Back in Westchester, Vanessa couldn't sleep. She lay beside Marcus in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Did you love her? She asked suddenly. Marcus exhaled slowly. That's not relevant. It is if she's trying to destroy us. She's not destroying anything, he muttered. She's just positioning. Vanessa turned toward him sharply. You sound impressed. He didn't respond, and that silence planted something dangerous inside her. Jealousy mixed with fear. The next morning, Vanessa did something reckless. She reached out to a journalist she knew, a lifestyle reporter who owed her a favor. I want a feature, she said sweetly, about resilience, about rising above toxic past relationships. The implication was clear. She wanted to control the narrative, paint me as bitter, obsessed, unstable. But narratives only work when facts cooperate, and facts were shifting. 3 days later, Brooks Freight lost another regional distribution contract. The client cited long-term stability concerns. Marcus slammed his office door hard enough to shake the frame. His CFO walked in minutes later, pale. There's more, she said quietly. One of our board members requested a private call with North River executives. Marcus's stomach dropped. Board members don't request competitor calls casually. They do it when they're preparing for alternatives. That night my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered this time. Lillian, came a familiar, strained voice. Marcus, you need to stop, he said. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, lights reflecting calmly in the river. Stop what? I asked softly. You're undermining my company. I'm strengthening mine, I replied. Silence. Then lower. What do you want? It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was desperation. And desperation is the moment power shifts completely. I want balance, I said. The kind you never gave me. He exhaled shakily. You're going to ruin everything. No, I corrected gently. You did that the day you believed I was replaceable. I ended the call first. In Westchester, Vanessa watched Marcus from across the room as he stared at his phone long after the call ended. She didn't ask who it was. She already knew. And for the first time since mocking me in that ballroom, Vanessa Caldwell Brooks felt afraid, not of losing status, not of gossip, but of something far worse, being outmatched. And as North River's valuation quietly climbed higher, and Brooks Freight stock began a subtle but undeniable decline, one truth settled into place. The war was no longer invisible, and the empire was officially shaking. The city skyline glimmered in early morning light, but inside the Brooks Freight boardroom, the atmosphere was heavy, almost suffocating. Marcus Brooks sat at the head of the mahogany table, the weight of investor scrutiny pressing down on him like a storm. Charts, reports, and financial statements were spread across the table, each one telling the same story in slightly different ways. Instability, mismanagement, and missed opportunities. Vanessa Caldwell Brooks, once so confident, now paced the room, heels clicking against the polished floor, her designer dress impeccable, but her composure cracking with every tick of the clock. If you've been following Lillian's story and love seeing carefully crafted revenge meet poetic justice, subscribe to her Retaliation, because every insult, every mockery, and every slight will be answered. The board members had gathered reluctantly, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and concern. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to assert authority, but it rang hollow in the room. "We're making adjustments," he said carefully, avoiding eye contact with several investors who had already been quietly siphoning confidence toward North River Transit. "Contracts are being reviewed. We have strategies in place." Howard Grant, the senior investor, leaned forward. "Strategies? Marcus, the North River acquisition offers have already gone through. Your Midwest expansion has stalled, and the refinancing clause is about to trigger. We need real answers, not optimism." Marcus swallowed hard. The optimism he had relied on for years now felt fragile. Vanessa's eyes darted to him, panic flickering beneath her mascara. "We can fix this," she whispered, trying to reassure both him and herself, but the reality was undeniable. At that precise moment, I was in Chicago, sitting across from Ethan Cole in a quiet, glass-walled conference room, sipping my coffee calmly, while watching the news update flash across the screen. Brooks Freight Logistics faces investor scrutiny amidst expansion concerns. A subtle smile crept across my face. Months of careful planning, silent investments, and quiet manipulation of the market had brought us here. I didn't celebrate. The war was methodical, precise, and patient. I only confirmed that the board was seeing the cracks I had anticipated, and Marcus was finally forced to confront the consequences of underestimating me. Back at the mansion, Vanessa felt it, the shift. She could see Marcus's tension, hear it in the stammer of his explanations during calls, feel it in the silent side-eye of board members when he spoke. Her curated world of social media perfection, champagne brunches, and viral content was now threatened by reality. Panic seeped into her carefully constructed confidence, and she finally understood that mocking me at the gala wasn't just cruel. It had been naive. She attempted a last-ditch effort, calling a public relations firm to spin the story, to rewrite her narrative as a supportive, understanding wife, attempting to portray me as obsessed and bitter. But words cannot hold against numbers, against contracts, against cold, undeniable truth. Every move I had made quietly months ago had positioned me beyond her reach. The boardroom confrontation came the following morning. Marcus presented his corrective measures, but every point he made was countered by the quiet, deliberate facts. North River had secured the best fuel contracts. Investors were already shifting allegiance. One of Brooks Freight's key distribution centers was being lured by alternative partners offering stability and better terms. Vanessa tried to interject, her voice rising in frustration, but the board had already stopped listening to her. Her presence was irrelevant. The power she had relied on to mock and manipulate had evaporated. At that moment, Marcus finally turned to her, desperation evident in his eyes. "You don't understand," he said, voice shaking. "This isn't just a hiccup." She realized the truth before he finished. They were losing control. Their empire, which she had believed untouchable, was crumbling quietly, methodically, irreversibly. Meanwhile, I remained calm in Chicago, receiving updates from Ethan with subtle nods. North River's expansion continued smoothly. Brooks Freight's competitors were being systematically redirected to more stable partners. Every client, every investor, every logistical detail Marcus had neglected had already been leveraged. My past humiliation had transformed into a strategic advantage. Every insult Vanessa ever threw at me, every mocking laugh she had shared in that ballroom, fueled the meticulous architecture of their downfall. When the final update arrived, Marcus officially losing majority board support, I allowed myself a quiet smile. Not triumph in malice, but satisfaction in justice. The woman who had mocked me would now live in the shadow of her own insecurity, witnessing the subtle dismantling of everything she had assumed was untouchable. Marcus, humiliated privately and professionally, would rebuild slowly, painfully, remembering for the rest of his life the person he had underestimated. Weeks later, I stood on the terrace of my Chicago office overlooking the river. The sun reflected in the water like liquid gold, calm and unshakable. I had done nothing flashy, no public declarations, no dramatic confrontations. I had rebuilt. I had watched silently while the empire that had tried to belittle me faltered under its own mismanagement. And in that quiet victory, I understood something profoundly satisfying. Power is quiet. Strategy is silent. Revenge is invisible until it's unstoppable. Somewhere in Manhattan, Vanessa Caldwell Brooks scrolled through headlines, trying to mask panic with a smile for her social media audience. Marcus Brooks paced his office, calls unanswered, investors impatient, empire trembling. And yet none of it was personal. It was inevitable. I whispered to myself, the Chicago wind brushing softly against my cheek. This is the future you never saw coming. And with that, the war was over. The ex-wife who had been mocked was no longer invisible. She was untouchable.